all were standing up for justice for Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed by Israeli forces just over 2 weeks ago, and standing in solidarity with the Palestinians in their ongoing struggle for justice. So please join us today for our protest and vigil in solidarity with Palestine. As part of national and indeed international action in response to the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, an Al Jazeera Palestinian journalist, and in response to the disgraceful and violent assault by Israeli police on the coffin bearers on her funeral procession, footage which shocked many people around the world.
The horrendous killing of a journalist just doing her job is no aberration. We know they have previously killed journalists, medics and children routinely, and all it does is further confirm something that we have known for a long time. I'm going to play you a song which is a rewritten version of an old Labour movement anthem. And thank you everyone for being here today. Keep marching, keep protesting and keep building the movement. Solidarity. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Because Shireen was a voice to the voiceless. She was reporting and telling Palestinian stories that are silenced constantly in the political platform. So Shireen was the voice to the voiceless. Unfortunately, Shireen today is voiceless herself. So we need to be her voice. Someone needs to speak and someone needs to tell these stories. And although they keep silencing our Palestinian voices, we should keep resisting. We should keep talking about Palestine, about these untold stories. We have heard a lot of condemnations and statements about the killing, the cold-blooded killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, but that is unfortunately not enough. Vigils are not enough. Protests are not enough. What we need is political action, because we're sick and tired of statements that are, at the end of the day, in vain, because nothing is happening. The United Kingdom is complicit in this, and I'm not only talking about the Balfour Declaration, but also because the bullets that killed Shireen Abu Akleh and thousands of Palestinians are unfortunately produced in this country. This country funds Israel militarily and politically and economically, and although it's heartwarming to see so many British people standing with Palestine, but this is not enough, because the government should stand against Israeli apartheid.
Israel has killed at least 46 Palestinian journalists since 2000, and no one has been held to account. Last month, the International Federation of Journalists, human rights lawyers and other Palestinian organisations made a formal complaint to the International Criminal Court at The Hague. The ICC investigates and, where warranted, brings to trial individuals who are guilty, individuals are charged with the greatest crimes. Crimes of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression. The AFJ complaint alleges war crimes against journalists by Israel's security forces. And that complaint will now be considered. It's been acknowledged by the court, and it could lead to formal investigation and prosecution. Over the years, several of our students have come from Palestine, and a few years ago, Rowan Kahaz joined our master's programme in journalism here. She was already a very experienced journalist. She'd worked for the BBC in Palestine, she'd worked for CNN, she'd worked for Al Jazeera, and she was the journalist who conducted the final interview, the last interview that Yasser Arafat gave before his death in 2004. When I was invited to speak today about Shireen, I contacted her, and I found her devastated. I think it's perhaps better that I read her words at this stage. You should hear them. She said, "Shireen was a great friend to me and my husband. He worked with her for more than 18 years. We're still in shock and can't believe that we've lost Shireen for good. Compassionate, loving to all, honest and very professional." We've already heard she spoke for the voiceless. Rowan said everyone loved her, and is missing her. She was always careful. Palestinians watched Shireen on Al Jazeera for 20 years, and each family now feels it has lost one of their own. In Jerusalem, when Israeli soldiers attacked the mourners as they were carrying her coffin, they held it tightly to protect her from falling. And she didn't fall, as our cause will never fall, despite all the aggression and the inhumane treatment. But in Palestine, no one is safe. Israel controls Palestinian life and turns it into a miserable one. What happened to Shireen is happening all the time in Palestine, and without punishment. Shireen was killed, and most probably the killer won't be punished. How will they punish a sniper who carried out orders? And the world will continue its silence. Israel has the power to control our life, she said, but it can't control our souls.
Quotation marks. Shireen Abu Akleh, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, Palestine. End of quotation. As a child, I used to hold my brush and stand in front of the mirror and just repeat this line, repeatedly and repeatedly. I just had Shireen Abu Akleh as my model, but I changed the name. This was the final news line that outlined most of what Palestine had meant to me as a child in my childhood memories. A heroine woman covering the reality of the situation in the occupied Palestine, and also showing the brutality of the Israeli occupation, the attacks on the Palestinian civilians. Hence, my dream was to serve the Palestinian community in my own way, but having Shireen as my model in that time and still. More than 20 years later, I witnessed my model that always exposed the Israeli atrocities becoming the first news line of every news outlet. I was hit by this line. Shireen, a 51-year-old Palestinian-American journalist, was intentionally assassinated by the Israeli army bullet to the head at around 6:30 a.m. However, journalists are the wider eye that international community can see through, and hence assassinating them is always their priority. Longer than it should, Israel have been facing total impunity after each attack. Don't let this stay the case by your complicit silence. Shireen and more than 46 journalists have been deliberately assassinated by Israel since 2000. Many others have been injured and went through so many operations since then, and way before, since 1948. In the occupation is the only way to protect all Palestinians. Thank you.
Shireen Akleh was shot in the face whilst wearing a press vest and a helmet and armed with only a mic, reporting on an illegal raid of a refugee camp. She was deliberately targeted. This was another attempt of Israel to silence the Palestinian cause, to hide the truth. Well, Israel, you cannot murder the truth. The world is watching you. The BBC is notorious for whitewashing crimes against the Palestinian people, and yet again they fell short of admitting who was responsible for this murder, stating only that a veteran journalist dies aged 51. Will we say, BBC, stop supporting Israel? We say shame on you. Tell the truth. BBC, tell the truth. Following Shireen's execution, the world was sickened of footage of her funeral being attacked by Israeli snipers and forces whilst tossing her casket around, encasing her dead body during her Christian procession on its way to church. Yet again, this was another attempt of Israel to commit the most sickening war crimes and act with full impunity.
It's great to see so many of you here celebrating the life of Shireen. That's why we're here, yeah? These pictures. It's about Shireen, yeah? It's not about anything else. The main thing today is about Shireen and the struggle for Palestine. But mainly it's a vigil for her because her life was taken ceaselessly. Someone said it best in a tribute to Shireen when they said, for 20 years, she was a bright torch that lit the plight of Palestinians for the world to see. I'm so full of love for every one of you here today, in solidarity with Shireen and for Palestinians who continue to fight for justice and equality every day under occupation and apartheid. But I'm also angry, like Chandi was, and you heard it in her voice, like Eman was when she said our government continues to support the occupation. I'm angry that the situation in Palestine continues a cycle of oppression which seems to extend to the indiscriminate assassination, as Hala said, of journalists like Shireen. I'm angry that the occupation is now entering its 8th decade. I spoke to my dad a few days ago to ask him his thoughts. He told me that Shireen was a voice for the Palestinians, as Hala said, and that she wanted to tell us stories that were never heard in the media. It didn't matter that she was Christian, because she was a humanitarian who cares deeply about justice for Palestinians. He also told me about one of our uncles who was recently arrested, blindfolded and detained for 12 hours for simply sharing online content about what was happening in our hometown of Hawara in the West Bank. What I want you to do is to continue to attend rallies like this. Join your local PSC. Join the BDS movement. If you're being told to bloody boycott Russian products, why the hell are you not being told to boycott Israeli products?
Thank you for bringing the voice of Palestine to the northeast of Newcastle, because Newcastle